The Dowager Princess of Equestria, Celestia, has written a 1.7 million word memoir reflecting upon her life, called Celestia, Sunrise, Sunset. She narrated all 250 hours of narrative herself, and the following excerpt is from the 120th chapter entitled The Twilight Saga.
The twilight years. How fondly I remember. Of course, during such times, it was much harder for me to acquiesce. Twilight was a formidable unicorn, and when I first met her, I knew there was going to be some difficulty reining her in. That right there is called a pun. As we all know, she eventually became the reigning Princess of Equestria. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, aren't I? Let's start at her beginning. When Twilight Sparkle first tested to be a part of my school for gifted unicorns, she exhibited great power. I was more than delighted to take her under my wing at such a remarkable show of magic. But my tutelage didn't go quite according to plan. You see, I was determined to release my dear sister Luna from the moon, but would need an impressive amount of power to do so. Did you really expect me to wait until that 1000th year willingly? Please. Unfortunately, the last unicorn I trained to help me, Sunset Shimmer, was a little too power mad to control, so I had her banished to another realm entirely and tried all over again. Twilight Sparkle was the opposite problem. Eventually, she too proved to be useless as an ally for such matters. But by the time I realized that, I knew I might as well just wait for the 1000-year mark. The book Predictions and Prophecies said, "The stars will aid in her escape." Of course I wrote that myself. The sun is a star, isn't it? And I fully intended to aid Luna in her escape, so it wasn't as if I were lying, per se. The longest day of the 1000th year gave me more magic to be able to use to free my sister at last. It's the longest day. Therefore, my powers would be at its strongest. Truly, I am confused that no pony else has riddled this out for themselves, but I suppose that's just the education system I established showing its fallacies. On that day, I couldn't have her muck up my plans to restore my sister to the world, so I sent her to that little unassuming town of Ponyville and instructed her to make friends. I'm sure you see the logic there, right? Pleased with my plan, I immediately set to work and successfully released my sister from her prison on the moon. How that little nuisance Twilight was able to magically make friends and defeat my sister all in one day was beyond me. For over 1000 years, I'd been plotting and planning to wreak my vengeance on Equestria. Yes, mock and cheer my pain, little ponies. That will certainly make me an empathetic ruler. For those of you reading and not listening to this memoir, that was sarcasm. There isn't a font for that just yet. Even so, my sister was returned to me. Equestria still needed to pay. I would enact my revenge and then steal away with Luna to the land of the Alicorns, where we belonged anyway. Besides, with my faithful student parading around as the savior of Equestria, if something were to go wrong, she would be the blamed party, right? Truthfully, I still took precautions. Firstly, I recovered the elements of harmony from Twilight and her instant friends under the guise of keeping them safe. Yeah, right. With the elements safely in my possession, I came up with the next plan of action: Discord. He was a formidable foe for my sister and I back in the day. Hell, we almost lost him the first time we'd encountered him. I knew his resurgence would be too troublesome for Twilight, so I set to work breaking him out of stone. I released the Draconiquus and, not so casually, discussed the whereabouts of the elements of harmony to my guards, while I knew he was listening. I couldn't just destroy them outright with every pony watching, especially Luna. At first, everything went swimmingly. Twilight and her friends came to Canterlot for the elements, but oh no, the elements are missing! How tragically unforeseen! I impressed upon Twilight the importance of stopping discord, and with a quick, Good luck, my little ponies. The fate of Equestria is in your hooves. I was absolved of responsibility. I was feeling so confident in my deception that I decided to really rub salt in the wound of Twilight's failure. I sent back all of Twilight's useless friendship reports. Cruel and unnecessary, perhaps, but my plans for vengeance were nearing their completion, and I was giddy with anticipation. That giddiness was my folly. Twilight wasn't demoralized by them. She took them as my sending her support, and could rise against discord with that added confidence. Do you know how sick with disgust I was when I had to publicly honor Twilight and her friends again for their good deeds? My next plot was far better conceived. I decided taking a gamble on Twilight was too risky. She was annoyingly good at countering my plans. Instead, I preyed upon Canterlot, indirectly upon myself. How could any pony believe I would put myself in harm's way? I had a few options in mind of the threat to use, but eventually settled upon the changelings. Up until that point, I'd kept a protection spell in Equestria to keep any changeling from entering our borders. I'm not particularly fond of neighbors. All I had to do was lift that spell, and send a few guard scouts in that general direction to garner some interest. At first, this too seemed like the perfect plan. Of course, I knew Miyamori Cadenza had been taken. I'm no fool. I was patiently waiting for the moment that Chrysalis would reveal herself, so I could face her in battle. I would make a big show of losing to said battle before making my hasty retreat with Luna. No pony even noticed my sister's absence in all the wedding planning anyway. What I didn't count on was that horrid goop cocoon incapacitating my magic entirely. How was I to know changeling magic would be strong enough to contain me? Oh well, Cadenza and the Shining Armor used the power of love or some such nonsense in the end anyway. Their magic was even more powerful than the elements of harmony, and that was a problem. Next, I brought back the Crystal Empire and sent Cadenza away. I knew they'd be no match for Sombra, as not even elemental magic could defeat him. As expected, they never returned. So I feigned concern and sent Twilight and her friends there next. 2 annoying birds with 1 stone, am I right? I even took it a step further to ensure that they would fail by turning it into a test for Twilight. I did this so I could discourage her from using her friend's help as she had done for Nightmare Moon and Discord. An even more perfect plan that ended in a perfectly awful failure. The biggest takeaway from this failure, however, was the relationship between myself and my sister. Luna was starting to catch wise to me keeping her and myself out of the efforts to save Equestria, so I brought her into my confidence. While she was initially against the idea, all it took was a little reminder of the attitudes and actions of the ponies after her banishment to rekindle the hatred she had for them. From then on, she became my ally. Sick to death of looking my failures in the face, I demanded Cadenza and her royal husband to rule the Crystal Empire. My next plan had to be even sneakier. Since Twilight and her friends were touting friendship so much, I decided to give them an impossible friendship task: reforming Discord. He'd almost beaten them once. Who was to say he couldn't try it again? I gave the task to the quiet one directly, knowing her sensitivity was the most vulnerable. Yet, somehow, some impossible way, she pulled it off. He was eating out of her hoof by the time I checked on their progress. This was becoming absolutely absurd. I realized if I were going to take out Equestria, I had to take out those pesky ponies first. For my 6th attempt, I decided rather than bringing back past villains to run amok, I would attack the problem at its source: the elements of harmony. If the elements were rendered useless, Twilight and her friends would be too, and the next plan would be sure to succeed. So, I gave my former pupil another impossible task: fixing Star Swirl's spell. Centuries ago, Luna and I had attempted to do the same, and rather than unlock the element's potential, we accidentally rendered them unusable. Of course, as bad luck would have it, Twilight pulled it off with hardly any trouble. By then, I was no longer bewildered by her feats of magic and morality, just enraged by them. From within my castle in Canterlot, I could feel the waves of Twilight's magic upon the spell's completion. Ever the quick wit, I magicked myself into the realm of magic that she'd been taken to, and took credit for her alicornifying, which is totally a word. Was I happy about it? Not necessarily, but I knew her elevated status as a princess would be a great distraction more than a hindrance to me. Since Twilight's element was now a permanent part of her crown, I would need to think of another way to rid myself of her. Luna asked me how I'd rid Equestria of my former pupil, and I realized I had the answer all along. The mirror to the other dimension. I had banished Sunset years ago and she never resurfaced again. I'd totally been overthinking this revenge against Twilight thing and decided to dispose of her rather than destroy her. Of course, Sunset discovered the portal before I could be rid of Twilight, so I ran with it. I made Twilight go in alone after her crown, once again trying to ruin the friendship aspect of her magic. The little dragon followed her, and I'm certain that is why the plan didn't succeed. You cannot imagine how infuriating it was to see her come back successful, and with a budding new friendship with Sunset Shimmer to boot. Well, if I couldn't attack the elements directly, I decided to do it indirectly by destroying the Tree of Harmony. Only Luna and I knew of the tree's existence, so no pony would catch me draining it of its magic. Well, we all know how that ended up, don't we? I successfully weakened the tree, but was then attacked and captured by a plant of all things. How was I supposed to know Discord had planted those plunder seeds all those centuries ago? You'd think I'd be happy that Twilight and her friends rescued my sister and I from the clutches of those vines, but I was equally as annoyed. The elements were back in the tree now, making it stronger than ever, and any attempts to weaken it would be fruitless. Now I had an OCD and anxiety-riddled new princess to deal with on top of grappling with her elevated state of magical might. I'll admit, my next plan was probably my worst one. I wasn't thinking clearly, all right? I was depressed and suffering under the incessant whining of my former student-turned-princess, and starting to butt heads with my sister. Seemed she'd been working through her trauma and wasn't as anti-Equestria as I thought. Rather than try to figure out who would be the best adversary for Twilight, I just went shopping in hell. Oh, excuse me, Tartarus. Tyrek looked formidable, and he had quite the rap sheet, so what could go wrong? Well, once everything started getting out of control, every pony was looking to me for answers and assistance, so I had no choice but to play along. I think that was the first time I truly rooted for her to succeed. If anything, it did convince Luna I was trying to turn over a new leaf in regards to Twilight and her friends, and how I viewed all of Equestria. If I was pro-Purple Princess for this instance, then I must have been planning to be going forward, right? After Tyrek, I needed a break. I stopped caring what Twilight and her peon friends were up to. I heard about some enchanted map thing and something about a unicorn dictator and buttfuck Equestria, but I didn't really tune in for any of that nonsense. Didn't even know the pony's name until she showed up to switch my cutie mark with Luna's for some stupid friendship lesson. The nerve of that peasant Sunshine Glitter. Or was it Sunlight Glamour? Ugh, I've been droning on about Twilight for far too long. I could continue explaining the ways I sabotaged her, such as slipping that book to Sunburst to release the Pony of Shadows, or setting the EEA against Twilight and her friendship school, or establishing the Tartarus Pen Pal program. But it's all so frightfully boring from this point on. Seriously, even I was getting tired of these ponies and their adventures, so I conceded defeat. I decided rather than work against Twilight, I would use her instead. I would retire with Luna, the whole world still believing me to be this glorious goddess of goodness and grace. The funny thing is, though, I hadn't actually tried to save Equestria since my sister was banished. When I did so after announcing my retirement, I actually had, well, fun. It was thrilling to be pitted against the odds and face down danger. This is why, dear readers, I am the final and most powerfully reformed villain. In the end, I actually wanted Twilight and her masses to save Equestria from the troublesome trio, Besides, encasing them in stone was the best way to cover my tracks, forever concealing my blame. Until now, of course. You may be wondering why I would disclose such secrets to the population now, when I could be under such scrutiny. Well, that is because of the very pupil I had resented for so long. Luna and I appealed to her soft heart and sensibilities to pardon me, and I intend for this memoir to captivate audiences all the way up the Canterlot bestsellers list. Now, with all of this Twilight nonsense behind us, I can recount and write about the fascinating saga of pot-bellied toads and how their influence shaped my early retirement, a subject which, I'm sure you will agree, is frightfully more fascinating than this past one.